The Burning Herd, Kanzhal, 17081. Fire turned an army into a stampede. One fire in the dark turned an army into a stampede. Not because the enemy broke through, because panic hit the camp before anyone understood what was happening. This is Kanzhal, 1708. On the map, find the North Caucasus, beneath Mount Elbrus, near the Malka River, in what is today Kabardino-Balkaria, a land of tall grass, broken hills, and narrow valleys. Beautiful in daylight, at night it becomes something else entirely, a place where sound travels farther than sight, and fear fills the spaces your eyes cannot. This series is about battles lost to chaos, not because soldiers were weak and not because generals were stupid, but because human systems fail under pressure. Communication breaks, signals are misunderstood, people act on incomplete information, and in the dark, one mistake spreads faster than any messenger. The Battle of Kanzhal is remembered as one of those nights. Sources agree that an invading force led by the Crimean Khan Qaplan Giray suffered a shocking defeat here in 1708, though later accounts disagree on details and numbers. What matters for this story is not the exact casualty count. What matters is the chain reaction that turned an organized army into a fleeing crowd. Picture the camp before the disaster begins. A temporary city spread across the foothills, rows of tents, wagons, cooking fires burning low, stacked weapons, long lines of horses tied to posts in the grass. Guards posted at the perimeter because every army knows night is when danger comes. But guards do not give certainty, they only give warning, and warning in the dark is rarely clear. The invading army is here to impose control. Campaigns in this region follow a familiar pattern: pressure, local leaders, demand tribute, punish resistance. The message is simple: submit or face the consequences. The Khan's force has marched, camped, and established presence. From their perspective, the operation is progressing. Men sleep, some lightly, some heavily. Horses stand tethered nearby, shifting their weight. Smoke from the fires drifts slowly through the camp. A sentry listens to wind in the grass and distant sounds he cannot quite place. Out there in the darkness, Kabardian fighters are moving. They do not rush forward in a dramatic charge. They move slowly and quietly, using terrain they know intimately. The goal is not to fight a fair battle in open ground. The goal is to strike when the enemy structure is weakest. At night, night attacks are rarely about killing first. They are about breaking the system that allows an army to fight at all. Then the trigger comes. Different sources describe the moment differently, but a common image appears again and again: animals driven into the camp with fire involved, horses carrying burning bundles, or simply a stampede ignited by flame and shouting. Whether every detail is literal or partly exaggerated by later storytellers, the effect is what matters. Sudden motion, fire, noise, shapes you cannot identify. Imagine waking up to that, not a trumpet, not a clear command. A roar, hooves tearing through rope lines, tethers snapping, tent poles shaking, sparks flying into dry grass, firelight flashing against cold moonlight, smoke rolling low across the ground. Men burst from tents trying to understand what they are seeing, but the camp has already changed shape. A stampede is not a battlefield maneuver. It is raw movement. Horses crash through lines and wagons alike. Animals slam into anything standing between them and open space. People are knocked aside before they have time to form a thought. Chaos becomes physical. In that moment, the human brain tries to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Someone sees fire and assumes the camp is under attack. Someone hears hooves and thinks cavalry has broken through. Someone shouts that the enemy is already inside. Maybe none of it is true, but truth moves slowly. Fear moves instantly. Within seconds, the camp runs on rumor instead of information. A gunshot cracks somewhere in the darkness, perhaps aimed at a shadow, perhaps fired in panic. A muzzle flash lights terrified faces for half a second. Smoke thickens. Another shot follows. Every sound feels like confirmation that the worst explanation must be correct. Officers try to restore order. They shout commands, but night steals their most important tools. They cannot see where their units are. They cannot tell which direction is safe. They cannot distinguish friend from foe in the shifting smoke. Orders require clarity. The dark provides none. Movement spreads through the camp. 10 men running becomes a signal that something terrible is happening. 50 men running makes it feel certain. When frightened horses break free and gallop through the tents, the image is overwhelming. Cavalry animals fleeing in the dark look like the collapse of the entire line. And this is the moment where panic becomes contagious. Human beings are wired to copy the crowd when information disappears. If everyone around you runs, you assume they know something you do not. The fastest decision your brain can make is to do the same. Run. More soldiers begin to move. More shots fire into the darkness. Smoke, sparks, and shadows blur together. Every new noise makes the situation seem worse than the last. The camp stops acting like an army. It starts behaving like a crowd. This is exactly the moment the attackers need. When the Kabardian fighters strike, they are not hitting a stable formation. They are hitting fragments, small groups trying to organize in the middle of confusion. A few silhouettes appearing at the edge of the firelight feel like a much larger force. Arrows or blades from the darkness feel like the perimeter collapsing. In reality, the attackers may be relatively few, but perception decides the outcome now. Without coordination, numbers mean little. Without clear signals, bravery means little. A soldier cannot fight effectively if he cannot even tell who stands beside him. Sources disagree on the exact sequence of the fighting and the scale of losses. What historians can agree on is that the invading force suffered a severe defeat, and the campaign in Kabarda lost its momentum. The night attack succeeded not because of overwhelming strength, but because it shattered the invaders' ability to act together. And that brings us to the real lesson of Kanzhal. This was not simply a story about fear. It was a story about systems. Night warfare exposes weaknesses that daylight hides. An army requires discipline after sunset that goes beyond courage. Passwords, controlled movement, strict fire rules, and clearly understood rally points are not minor details. They are the structure that prevents confusion from becoming panic. Identification matters just as much. In darkness, every shadow looks like an enemy unless soldiers have reliable ways to distinguish friend from foe. Without that clarity, men begin fighting ghosts. Animals also become a critical vulnerability. A mounted force depends on horses, and horses panic faster than people. Once the horse lines break, mobility disappears, and chaos spreads through the camp like a shockwave. Command systems must also survive the first moment of disaster. If leadership depends on a single location or a small number of voices, then one sudden crisis can cut those links instantly. When command disappears, soldiers are left to make their own decisions, and thousands of independent decisions rarely produce order. The final lesson is uncomfortable but unavoidable. Large armies often feel secure simply because they are large. Yet size can become a weakness. More tents, more animals, more people, more noise. The bigger the camp, the harder it becomes to control when confusion starts. By the time dawn approaches at Kanzhal, the outcome is already clear. The valley grows quiet again. Smoke drifts upward through pale morning light. Broken tents and scattered equipment mark where the camp once stood. What remains is not a battlefield of neat formations, but the aftermath of an army that lost its ability to function. The invaders arrived expecting to control the region. Instead, they learned the oldest lesson in warfare. An army is not just weapons and numbers. It is a system of trust, communication, and discipline. When that system collapses, especially in darkness, even a powerful force can disappear in a single night. Kanzhal, 1708, reminds us that chaos is not always an accident. Sometimes it is the most effective weapon on the battlefield. And when panic arrives before understanding, the battle may already be over.